Hello everyone, welcome back to GlitchTechX. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Oh boy, I've got an action-packed episode for you guys. Today, we'll compare the Intel Core 12th generation processors, the Alder Lake chips, against the Ryzen 5000 series processors. So stay tuned. Hey guys, so Intel has released the 12th generation chips, the 12th generation core chips, and I'm excited about those. You know, they have a very good value proposition and they are pretty beefy as well. I mean, the performance numbers are great. So let's take a look at the Alder Lake chips and how they pit against the Ryzen 5000 series chips. So today we'll compare the Core i5-12600K processor with the Ryzen 5 5600X. We'll take a look at the benchmarks, the synthetic benchmarks, as well as the correlated benchmark data from across the internet. And we will also compare the Intel Core i7-12700K with the Ryzen 7 5800X. So stay tuned, let's get underway. So first off, we'll take a look at the tech specs of these chips. So let's see what we're dealing with. First up, we've got the Core i5-12600K processor. It has a 20 megabytes of cache and it's from the Alder Lake family, the 12th generation Intel Core family. It was launched in Q4 2021, so it's relatively new as compared to the Ryzen 5000 series chips. The recommended customer price from Intel is $289 to $299. Now let's take a look at the CPU specifications. The total number of cores, the physical cores, is 10, out of which the performance cores are 6 and the efficient cores are 4. So Intel has come up with a new design, a new chip design, where they are segregating the cores on that chip, the physical cores, into two parts. One would be the performance cores, which have hyper-threading enabled, and the others would be, or the remaining would be, the efficient cores, which don't have hyper-threading enabled. They are more power efficient. Yes, they have a lower clock cycle, but for normal day-to-day activities, such cores are useful. They are power efficient and they lead to longer battery lives and longer utilization times. So anyhow, if we take a look at the total number of threads, we've got 16 threads in total in the Core i5-12600K chip. How we get to this number, I'll just let you know. The performance cores, like I said, they have hyper-threading enabled, so we've got 6 into 2, 12 threads available, and then we've got 4 efficient cores which don't have hyper-threading enabled, so in total we've got 16 threads. Now let's talk about the core clock frequency. The max turbo frequency is 4.9 GHz. The performance core max turbo frequency, so the max turbo frequency of the performance cores, is 4.9 GHz. The efficient core max turbo frequency is 3.6 GHz. The performance base frequency is 3.7 GHz, and the efficient core base frequency is 2.8 GHz. We've got a 20 megabyte Intel Smart Cache, a total L2 cache of 9.5 megabytes, and a maximum power TDP of 150 watts. So yeah, it is a bit power hungry. If you take a look at the memory specifications, the max memory size supported is 128 gigabytes. It can support DDR5 as well as DDR4 RAMs. So yeah, DDR5 is on the horizon. There have been DDR5 kits that have been launched by the manufacturers, and there are motherboards which support DDR5, which also support DDR4, and there's a plethora of hardware that's on the horizon. So DDR5 is right up there. Max memory channel supported is 2. It's a dual channel memory setup. Although anyone buying a Core i5 or a Core i7 would not utilize the inbuilt processor graphics, but the Intel chips do have inbuilt processor graphics. They have an iGPU. Moving on, let's talk about the competitor. From the red team, we have the Ryzen 5 5600X. It's a bit older as compared to the 12600K. It's probably a year older. Number of CPU cores, number of physical cores is 6, number of threads is 12. Pretty easy to decipher how we get to this number. The max boost clock is 4.6 GHz, the base clock is 3.7 GHz, total L2 cache is 3 MB and total L3 cache is 32 MB, giving us a total cache size of 35 MB. Now look at this number. The default TDP of the Ryzen 5 5600X is 65 watts compared to the 150 watts of the 12600K. So yeah, the Intel 12th generation chips are power hungry as compared to the Ryzen chips, the AMD counterparts. Like I said, it's a year older as compared to the 12600K, and yeah, the maximum memory specification supported by the Ryzen 5 5600X is a 32 MHz DIMM. It supports DDR4, so no DDR5 support, PCI 4.0, whereas the 12th generation Alder Lake CPUs, they support PCI Gen 5 as well. Moving on, let's take a look at the Core i7 12700K processor. That's the latest and the greatest offering from the blue team from Intel. It has a 25 MB of cache and up to 5 GHz of boost clock. So let's take a look at the tech specs. Fairly recently launched, yes, pretty recent as compared to the Ryzen 5000 series. Now the suggested customer price from Intel is $409 to $419. Total number of physical cores 12, out of which 8 are performance cores, 4 are efficient cores. This gives us a total thread count of 20. So 8 performance cores into 2 because we've got hyperthreading enabled, 16 thread counts, and 4 efficient cores which give us 4 threads. 16 plus 4, yes, you got it, 20 total threads. Now the max turbo frequency is 5 GHz. That's stratospheric. Yeah, I mean 5 GHz on an air cooler, that's commendable. Now the Intel Turbo Boost Max Technology 3.0 frequency is 5 GHz. Performance Core Max Turbo frequency is 4.9 GHz. And the Efficient Core Max Turbo frequency is 3.8 GHz. The Performance Core Base frequency is 3.6 GHz. And the Efficient Core Base frequency is 2.7 GHz with a 25 MB of Intel Smart Cache. Total L2 cache is 12 MB. Processor base power is 125 watts and the max turbo power is 190 watts. Wow. Wow. So 190 watts, that's a beefy chip, that's a power hungry chip. Now let's take a look at the memory specifications. Total max memory size supported is 128 GB. Memory types, again, DDR5 4800 MHz and DDR4 up to 3200 MHz. It's a dual channel memory setup. Pretty basic throughout the Intel 12th generation line. Now if you take a look at the processor graphics, again, anyone running a Core i7 would not usually use the onboard graphics, but then again, it has onboard graphics, whereas both the Ryzen 5000 chips that we are comparing today, they do not have onboard graphics. You need a discrete GPU. Moving on, let's compare this with the contender, with the counterpart from the Ryzen stable, that is the Ryzen 7 5800X. This is from the red team. Again, it's a 5000 series processor. It's a year older with 8 CPU cores, physical 8 CPU cores, and number of threads is 16. A max boost clock of 4.7 GHz, base clock of 3.8 GHz. Total L2 cache is 4 MB and total L3 cache is 32 MB, giving us a total cache of 36 MB. Unlocked for overclocking, yes, it is unlocked, and it has an AM4 socket, and the default TDP is 105 watts. So yes, it requires less power, considerably less power as compared to the Intel Core i7 12700K. Now let's take a look at the benchmarks. I know that you've been waiting for these numbers. These are collated from the internet. These are collated from the various benchmarking services out there. So take it with a pinch of salt. Your experience might be a bit different. But then again, let's take a look at the benchmark numbers. Alright, so if we compare the Core i5-12600K with the Ryzen 5 5600X, the Core i5-12600K has a suggested MRP of $300 or a launch price of just $289 USD, whereas the Ryzen 5 5600X right now has a price of $289 USD. Now if you take a look at the benchmarks, if you take a look at the performance figures, the Core i5-12600K beats the hell out of the Ryzen 5 5600X. It's around 18% more beefier, it has more power performance, and it's comparative in price as well. So yeah, I mean, I would say that 12600K kind of wipes the floor with the Ryzen 5 5600X. If you take a look at the average score, if you take a look at the single core, dual core, quad core and octa core performance, the 12600K beats the Ryzen 5 5600X hands down, around about 33 to 43% of performance gain to be seen in single core through octa core, and wow, that is great. Alright, now if we compare the Core i7-12700K with the Ryzen 7 5800X, we will talk about the benchmark figures in a short while, but right now, if we talk about the effective speed of these two processors, the 12700K leads by a margin of 20%. This is based on various user benchmarks, and if you take a look at the speed rank, the 12700K is third out of 1300 or odd processors, whereas the Ryzen 7 5800X is 25th out of the 1300 odd processors out there. And if you take a look at the average score and the overclocked score of the 12700K and the Ryzen 7 5800X, the 12700K knocks it out of the park. It has 29% more performance in the average score. So single core, dual core, quad core and octa core. Octa core with a whopping 47% increase in performance. 47% gain in performance. That's commendable. That is great. Alright, so let's take a look at the performance numbers. No, I don't have any review samples or any review chips. I'm just a lowly and poor content creator. So you'll have to make do with the benchmarks on the internet. So if you take a look at the benchmark, and if we compare the Intel Core i5-12600K with the Ryzen 5 5600X, we have already established that the 12600K is faster than the 5600X. If you take a look at the single thread rating, the 5600X has a single thread rating of 3382, whereas the 12600K has a single thread rating of 4023. And now taking a look at the CPU mark score, the 5600X gets a score of 22,152, whereas the 12600K gets a CPU mark score of 24,347. That's 24,347. So the 12600K outperforms the 5600X in single thread workloads by around 18%, and the 12600K outperforms the 5600X by around 9% in total. This is actually bad news for AMD, and this makes it even worse because the 12600K has a launch price of $289 as compared to the launch price of the 5600X, which was around $300, $299 US. But you rarely find CPUs at launch price, so of course these prices keep on fluctuating and they are inflated right now for both the chips. Moving on to the 12700K versus the 5800X comparison. The 5800X has a single thread rating of 3495 as compared to the single thread rating of 3910 for the 12700K. So definitely the 12700K is faster in single core workloads. And if we talk about the CPU mark cumulative rating, the 5800X scores 28,479, that's 28,479 points, whereas the 12700K scores 29900, that's 29,900 points. This means that the 12700K outperforms the 5800X by around 11% in single thread workloads and by around 5% in the cumulative CPU mark points. Now if we talk about the price to performance ratio, the 12700K has a launch price of $409 and the 5800X had a launch price of around $449. So the 5800X was a bit pricier as compared to the 12700K at launch, and even now the prices keep on fluctuating. It's somewhere around there, somewhere around $400 for the 5800X, and the 12700K is around $409. So definitely with just a difference of around $9, you're getting more performance. So 12700K seems to be the better deal over here. So to summarize our discussion today, I would say that the Intel 12th gen chips, oh man, wow, Intel has knocked it out of the park. I would say that they have better price to performance ratio. They are better in single thread as well as multi-threaded workloads as compared to the AMD counterparts. They are cheaper as per the launch price, but then again, CPU prices, GPU prices, everything is haywire right now. So immaculate price to performance ratio for the 12th gen chips. If you're building a PC right now, you can go with the 12th gen chips if you find any, if you find it for a decent price, that is. And they are newer, they support DDR5, they will have more longevity as compared to the Ryzen 5000 series. So definitely I would give the Intel 12th gen Alder Lake chips a big thumbs up. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for sticking with me till the end, and do like the video if this video was helpful. Subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.